All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to week two of EDTC 614 Introduction to Distance Learning. Today, I wanted to start off by giving you this primer video on distance learning. Now, this is based on an article that I wrote with my co-writing partner, Dr. Veronica O'Neill. And although it focuses on strategies to maximize asynchronous learning, there was a section where we talked a little bit about the history of distance learning. And I thought I would use this infographic that Dr. O'Neill and I created for our chapter and thought it would be a good way to explain some of the, I would say, nuances when it comes to the history of distance learning. Now, a couple things to note here, folks. Distance learning is not new. It's not a recent phenomena of this current century or even the previous century. It's been around for a very long time. Now, there are debates. So I have like a truck that's literally honking and beeping in front of my home. Um, when it comes to the history of distance learning, when you look at the research and you go back and try to understand, what are the earliest cases of what we call distance learning, we can find that distance learning dates back to the 1800s. Because if you think about what the definition of distance learning is, distance learning is where any form of learning is happening at a distance. This could be separate from time and place. This could be separate from being in front of somebody or being remote. Now, these ideas are not new to us today in our modern age, but in the earliest, I would say, forms of distance learning, we go back to the 1840s when Sir Isaac Pitman used to send these shorthand lessons. So people would learn how to write shorthand. It was these manuscripts that were then sent out via mail to a learner. The learner would do their work and then submit the work back via mail through postage back to Sir Isaac Pitman. And what's interesting about this is that when you look at how this form of distance learning works, again, it's definitely something that we can't even begin to fathom what that looks like today, because it really was truly learning happening at a distance. But over time, as technology evolves, and I'm going to be very liberal in terms of my definition of what we consider to be technology. And technology for me is any tool that you can use to support the learning process. What do I mean by that? You could use a ruler to help teach certain math concepts. You could use little beads or balls or an abacus to teach concepts of math. You could also use many non-technical or non-wired items to teach concepts. In pre-K and in other, I would say, younger grades, you'll see things like little manipulatives, paper, pencil, even the chalkboard was considered a technology of its time. But as we started to move into more of I would say, the beginning of the technological, what we consider to be the technological age in the 1900s, you start to see the use of television. And the State University of Iowa actually was one of the first universities or institutes of higher learning that would promote learning through the use of courses through television. Not a new concept, believe me, because other universities like New York University and many others have promoted courses and have actually conducted courses as television programs. But again, this is based on the technology that was available at the time. Over time, you started to see the emergence of other online forms of learning. For example, the Open University in the UK was first created in 1969, where students were able to, again, use the technologies of the day to try to get a handle on their learning and personal development. As time progressed, we started to see the use of VHS tapes, audio records, audio tapes, CDs, and DVDs. And that eventually led to what we now begin to learn or understand, and at least in our level of understanding today, to what we begin to define as the modern era of distance learning. Materials would get sent out, students would review the materials, and through some form or fashion be able to connect back to the instructor. Now, in 2012, we saw the emergence of what we call MOOCs. MOOCs were massive online open courses, and it was a first major step in trying to democratize learning because people could take these courses, such as courses from institutions such as Harvard, Columbia University, and many others that formed these institutions, or for lack of a better word, they formed these cohesive, we'll call it coalitions, and formed organizations that some of you may have heard of in this day and age, such as Coursera, edX, just to name a few. And what they would do is provide, at the time, free courses that anybody could take, so that it didn't matter if you were a student at Harvard or Columbia University or Penn State. You could take these courses for non-credit at the time and get an education. Now, these were done through the technology of the day, which involved tools such as WebEx, some other predecessor tools to Zoom, Google Chat, and other related tools that we use today. But we didn't really begin to see a major shift in terms of how distance learning could be applied until the first MOOCs for college credit were launched in 2015. So the idea was, look, you don't have to come to a physical brick and mortar school. You could learn at a distance and get credit for it. Now, some universities were already piloting these ideas for quite some time. Unfortunately, what really pushed all of this into the forefront of the collective consciousness right now was the COVID-19 epidemic in 2020. Now, unfortunately, there were many, many things that probably could have gone better in terms of how distance learning happened. Some of you have already noted some of this already in your week 1 discussion posts when it comes to what technologies were available to you, what guidance or instruction was available to you in terms of how do you teach online? How do you create that presence with your student when you're doing this at a distance? And it really pushed the issue to the forefront. But again, you could have these tools available to you, but it really comes down to how are you, the instructor, knowledgeable in terms of what do you do in these kind of situations? How do you engage students at a distance? How do you create that online presence without being actively online with each other? And a lot of that, in my personal opinion, was missing, among many other things. So it's part of the reason why I've spent the last, I would say, I don't want to date myself too badly here, but I've spent almost the last 20 years of my career focusing on how people learn through distance learning, through e-learning, finding ways and the strategies that help people learn from a distance. But when you think about this idea of distance learning, there's been a lot of discussion in recent years, not all of it good, because of what we experienced in the pandemic. And unfortunately, it's definitely left a bad taste in some people's mouths. But the good news, and the good news is that's where we come in, the educational technologists, the distance learning leaders that are going to lead the way by using sound and, more importantly, research-based methods to help you, our instructors in the field today, on how you can use strategies, proven strategies, and research-based strategies to help you when you have to lead distance learning in your institutions. That's the main purpose of this class. It's the main purpose of this course and why it's part of the greater umbrella that is educational technology, because we are able to use educational technologies to create positive environments for learning, even at a distance. Now, I wanted to give you this primer because you're going to read from chapters 1 and 2 from Clark and Mayer's book. And I wanted you to have at least a little bit of this foundation in the back of your mind as you read through these chapters and begin to really think about what are the strategies that I should be considering when it comes to developing an online course or leading an online course. That's why we're here. And that's the purpose of, I think, this course. So you're going to get quite a few strategies throughout the semester. But for right now, let's get grounded in terms of what is distance learning and how Clark and Mayer define it. But more importantly, begin to think about how can we apply these principles and ideas into our own teaching? How do we add these strategies to our toolkit so that we can better serve all of our students? So with that, I'm going to leave you now to go back and read chapters 1 and 2 of Clark and Mayer. And I look forward to seeing your thoughts and reactions in the discussion board. Thanks again, everyone. And more importantly, enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.